I'm the Book Baron. Welcome in, everybody. So today I'm excited because we're going to be talking about everything that I read in May. Although it wasn't like a very high volume month, I had multiple 5 stars, and I feel like that never happens to me. Normally I feel like I get 1. So it feels like it's been a really good reading month. It did end with a few more DNFs than normal. I don't know if that bodes well for next month. So we'll get into that and some of the issues that I was having with those books. But before I do, I want to warn you of 2 different things. The first one is very hot here. Over 80 degrees here in Fahrenheit. For the civilized world, I think that's like 30 degrees Celsius. That sounds about right. It's at least pretty close. And I don't have air conditioning, so I'm gonna get sweaty and shiny, but I promise we'll get through this together. That's the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to warn you about is that I usually go in chronological order, and I'm not really able to do that this time around because I needed to switch around some books because I wanted to put books from series kind of together. So if things kind of feel out of order, if I'm like, oh yeah, I read this right after XYZ book, and you're like, that's not the order that it's in though, that's why. Might make things a little bit more convoluted, but I swear I was trying to make it easier on us. With all of that out of the way, let's jump into the books. So the first book that I have is The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. This is the first book in the Weather Mages of Mistral. I just feeling a little bit uncomfortable with that word for some reason. So this is a fantasy romance, or actually this is probably more romantasy. It's got arranged marriage, rivals to lovers. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we have 2 different kingdoms that have been at war for a significant amount of time. The Winter Kingdom and the Summer Kingdom. Winter Kingdom, that's where our hero's from, and he is handsome and considered very attractive, but he is very battle-hardened and has a pretty cold heart, partially because he carries this very dreaded power called the Ice Heart. It's a curse that's allowed him to avenge the death of his brother, which is caused by someone in the Summer Kingdom, but it does have some side effects in that it makes him cold-hearted. But they are just on the precipice of negotiating peace, so that's going to come in the form of one of the Summer Princesses getting married to him. The Summer Princess that ends up being picked is our heroine, and she's picked kind of in an act of trickery. The Summer King is really keen to get rid of her. He doesn't really like her all that much, to the point that the kingdom isn't even really remembering that they have a 4th princess. So he's like, great, an opportunity to pawn her off. It also has the added benefit of serving as a punishment because the king is also mad at her. So he's like, 2 birds, 1 stone. What could be better? But what was supposed to be a punishment ends up becoming an overwhelming passion. Overall, I felt like this book was fine. The characters and their relationships, I just felt like kind of lacked a certain amount of depth, and I never fully bought into the world. With the characters, I think both of them started out pretty stereotypical. The heroine's very much this like typical stubborn, but it's kind of like a stupid, naive brashness that comes with that. And the hero is the typical like, I'll kill you if you get out of line type of guy. I don't know why I used an old man voice for that, but we're gonna move on. Those stereotypes, those like archetypes were kind of leaned into more heavily at the beginning and eased up the further we got in, but it was quite jarring at the beginning to have these just intensely stereotypical characters. And I think that's part of why I never really felt like I could ease into this relationship, because the characters didn't feel like they had nuanced identities, and so it gave their relationship this very mercurial feel where they would almost make progress too easily and then just as easily change their mind about the other person. And so it was like this back and forth that felt very over dramatic, over the top, and didn't feel like it was like grounded in reality. And I think what didn't help with this at all was the introduction of Spice early. For plot reasons, it did need to get introduced early, but I did feel like it really sidetracked a lot of relationship development that could have been happening. The other thing that I think really sticks out to me as not quite landing was the world. There were a lot of fantasy elements that were introduced early on, but it never felt like it was truly part of the story. It felt like it was used more so to convey mood and to just have something for the 3rd act. But to be honest, this could have been almost the same story, just make it a historical. And I don't think that there would have been a lot of difference in how this story played out. So for me, it fell short in a lot of ways with the development. So I end up giving this one a rating of 3 stars. Next up, I have the second book in a series. It's the Chronicles of the Warland by Elizabeth Vaughan, which is Warsworn. It's a fantasy romance. It's got a warlord hero, a healer heroine, got a clashing of cultures. The premise for this series is that Laura is a healer princess, and her kingdom has been at war with the Firelanders, who are like the plains people that live like right next to her kingdom. Now, when her brother is trying to negotiate a peace settlement, he ends up sending her to live with the Firelanders, and this is kind of posed as something that she needs to do in order to save her people. So my thoughts on this one. I was really disappointed with this book. The beginning, I felt like there was good additional cultural and world development that was happening, and I felt like that was also true with the ending, where we were really building up to what was going to be the plot of book 3, but the middle chunk felt like it should have been a novella. It's centered around a plague and how the Skye people approach it and how the Firelanders or the Plains people approach plague, and so you do learn more about their cultures, but I don't know that that story needed to take up a full book in the series. I really feel like this series should have been a duet. Like, I can really boil down this second book to a couple of really crucial pieces of information that you would need to know for the third book, but otherwise very skippable. So it was sad coming off of Warprise, the first book in the series, which was, did I say that already? You do have to read this in order. It's a proper series. Read Warprise first. Now you know. But I really feel like coming off of that book, which was a 5-star, and then just have this book that just felt like a bunch of filler, I gave this one a rating of 3 stars. So then I moved on to the third book in that series, and overall, this was so much stronger than book 2. Reminds me a lot of why I loved Warprise. You really get to see more of Laura kind of stepping into her power and make really intentional political decisions, even if it puts herself at danger. And there was a little bit of a trope that I don't normally like in this book, where the hero and heroine were separated, but I think it was used really effectively, allowed for Laura to take control of her life, show these people the power that she has and what she can really offer them. And there was like this really big buildup, and then there was like this nice decompressing that was happening, that I was just like, oh, we just get all of these tender moments.
Interrupt this programming to bring you an important message.
Hi, so I was watching the footage back for this entire review, and I realized like it kind of sounds like I don't like this book because I am lobbing some of the weird complaints, but I swear this was truly a 5-star. And this had everything that I loved about Warprise. The relationship was incredible. Cure as a hero, edible. But I felt like I had already talked about that a lot, and then I realized the review for Warprise is not in this video. So I just look like I'm complaining about a book and then being like, 5 stars, incredible. I had small qualms. I swear, these are really minor nitpicky things because I loved the vast majority of the book. So these little things that came up, I was like, that caught me off guard. I was not prepared. So anyways, I just wanted to say that.
Back to the rest of my review.
And it almost like kind of lulled me into a false sense of security because the third act really got my heart rate up. I was flabbergasted. It was so intense. I will say that it did get derailed just like a little bit because randomly Laura just starts thinking about an incident from book 2 that the big bad was involved with, or she starts putting the pieces together, and it's like right after she's just escaped danger and really traumatic things have happened. And then she's having this whole internal conversation with herself of like, oh, this is what actually happened there. And it has no bearing on how the rest of the story plays out. It plays no role in how the big bad is taken down. It doesn't tell us anything new about the big bad. I found that to be a really strange choice, but that was like my biggest criticism of the book, truly. Oh, a couple things that made me laugh that I completely forgot about. There was one scene where there's 2 little children characters. They are completely inconsequential. This has no bearing on my rating at all, but I find it hilarious. The little girl's name is a derivative for the Polish word beer, and the little boy's name is just the word the in Spanish. What interesting choices we've made here. Oh, and then the last thing that I'll say about the epilogue I liked and didn't like. Okay, so I liked it because it wasn't the typical like marriage, babies. It focused on kind of a specific event that happened after the original timeline of the book. But the event that they focused on was also kind of sad because it had to do with characters that passed in the book and remembering them. And that was just like kind of hurt. kind of hurt a lot. Overall, I did give this one a rating of 5 stars. So next up, we have the first DNF, which is the second time I've DNF'd this book. Ooh, I know. It's Daggermouth by H.M. Wolfe. So this is the first book in the Heart duology. It's a dystopian dark romance. It's got enemies to lovers, a political marriage of inconvenience, frankly. The premise for this is basically that we have, I believe it's a city or a civilization of some kind that's built in rings, and the closer in you have, the more money you have, the more luxury, and then the further out, it's more like rebellious and squalor, and you're not as provided for. So the heroine is from the Outer Rings, and she works as a mercenary, which are called Daggermouths. She is one of the best. She is like a no feelings, just goes out, does her job, no questions asked. So her latest assignment is going to be her most dangerous one yet, and unfortunately, her bullet misses the mark, leaving her trapped and imprisoned in the inner rings. Her mark? Grayson, son of the very brutal leader that's in place, and Grayson does a lot of his father's dirty work, a lot of public executions, even for the most mild of crimes, so you can see why he was the target. When things go wrong in this assassination, he is basically forced to marry his would-be assassin as a show of control. See, even the most feral, even the most disobedient can be tamed. So I was actually buddy reading this with Sam from Sam Reads a Little, and we both kind of got stuck at a certain point and just wanted to read other things. So unfortunately, this is also my second time DNFing this book 50% in. The plot progression is just a little bit slow in that first 50%, even though there's some very intense scenes, and I think the action sequences are really well written. It's the in-between points where I just find myself drifting a little bit. I also noticed a lot of issues with the world building. I'm not really sure if where we're at is a city or if it's a larger territory. I don't know who's around them. Is there a wall? Like, what's preventing people in the outer city from not just like moving fully away from this civilization? I'm not really sure. There was also some issues that I had with the masks. A lot of the people in power wear masks and you're not supposed to reveal your face, and that ends up being part of the reason that he's forced to get married, is because his like mask comes off during this assassination attempt. But it feels weird that we can cover up the assassination attempt but not necessarily the mask coming off. So there's things like that that I kind of was really getting hung up on, because world building is something that's really important to me. I don't really know how to feel about this book anymore. Like, I have a lot of love for it because I think it's a cool story and I think the action sequences are so good, but I don't know, there's just something that's like not quite right. So I think the next time that I pick it up, because I will finish this at some point, I will just pick up at the 50% mark and not reread that beginning portion and just see if I can finally finish this book. But I'm not going to give it a rating because I didn't finish it this time around again. All right, now I'm gonna go through my vlog books. As always, if you want my full thoughts, I will link that up here for you, but I'm going to try my best to keep these as high level as possible, as rapid fire as we can go. First off, we had Captive by R.J. Lewis, first book in the Captive duology, dark romance, captor captive. That was kind of the theme, was captor captive or captive captive, so I'll probably stop saying that as one of the call outs for the plot. But anyways, this one has like kind of a mafia organized crime element to it, but we have our heroine Vixen and our hero Nixon. Yes, I know they sound like Santa's reindeer. So the book opens when Vixen is 1 year into captivity, and Vixen's been living in Nixon's hotel that he owns and controls every aspect of. So there's no hope for her to escape, and they've fallen into those roles. She plays the victim, he plays the villain, but the heroine is desperate to escape and also to please her captor, leading to a very toxic relationship of sorts. And the hero just desperately wants her to remember. I think this had a lot of emotional pieces. This had a lot of great tension. It was so propulsive to read because I was like, I need to know what happens next. I need to know what she needs to remember. Why does she feel like a captive and also kind of not? I think like the psychology of these characters was so fascinating to me. I absolutely loved it. And it really kept me guessing. I would think I could guess the direction of it, and then it would maybe go there for a bit, but then it would move on quickly to something else, and I just would never see it coming. Does that make sense? Okay. 4 stars, let's move on. So then I moved on to Dolly by Measha Stone. This is a standalone dark romance. It has more of like a psychological thriller mystery kind of feel and leans a little bit almost horror. This is about our heroine Dolly, and she has been in captivity for a number of years. She's been in a situation where she is on camera and is debased at the whim of whoever the highest bidder is. That's all I want to say on that. I feel like if I say anything more, YouTube will get mad at me. But then one day, Ken ends up showing up. There is someone else in captivity with her, and because he hasn't been captive as long, gets her to start caring about herself and find the will to live. So this one, I think I was a little bit frustrated with because this really had like 5-star potential, but it really just did not get there. It's very quick. It's satisfying in a certain regard. It's definitely unhinged. I just think it needed a little bit more development. There were some character inconsistencies that really bothered me, where it kind of felt like we were trying to go like really unhinged, almost like a Harley Quinn type character. And then other times we were very logical and like putting the pieces together and laying traps. I felt very conflicted about the character because I felt like I was getting a different person in every scene, just kind of depending on what that scene called for. And then there was no build in the relationship, but it is really satisfying because like the bad guys get got, and who doesn't love that? But ultimately I did give this one a rating of 3 stars. Then I moved on to Prisoner by Annika Martin and Skye Warren. This is the first book in the Criminals and Captives series. It's a dark romance. It's kind of got like a prison setting initially, hostage. Abigail is our heroine, and she's been assigned as part of like a capstone project to teach a writing class in the prison. And that's where she ends up running into Grayson, who is one of the prisoners. He ends up signing up for her class kind of like last minute because he knows that if he can be part of this class, he can get his buddies to break him out. All of that's going down, and Abigail kind of gets caught in the middle of it, and they know they can't leave her as a witness, so our hero ends up taking her on the run with him. So overall, I thought this one was quite fun, actually. This had characters that usually, if you would have just described them to me, I would have been like, I'm not interested in that type of book, but I feel like they just fit the prison escape setting so well. So it was kind of fun to see those characters and those like archetypes in a setting that I really was like, this is where they belong. This is how those like archetypes really work. And this one ended up being a lot more action-packed than I was expecting. But I think my enjoyment was kind of dampered by a couple different things. One, I feel like the ending just got a little bit too Hallmark, got a little bit too soft and sweet for me. And then the other thing was throughout, I kind of noted, because I read this via audiobook, that I didn't love the choices the female narrator was making because she came across whiny, I think, instead of really sympathetic. And I think that really started to wear on me the further I got into the book. So I wouldn't recommend the audiobook. I would recommend this book. However, I did end up bumping up my rating from 3 stars to 4 stars because ultimately I did enjoy the vast majority of this book. And then last one, I have Captive in the Dark by CJ Roberts. This is the first book in the Dark Duet, I guess that's all it's called. It's a dark romance about like revenge. So the hero Caleb has been kind of planning a revenge plot with some other people for a number of years. Some terrible things happened to him in his past, both to him personally and to his family, and he wants to get revenge on the people that perpetrated that. So he has been kind of building this reputation underground, and the last piece of this puzzle is he needs to take someone that he is going to train as a pleasure slave. And that, unfortunately, is our heroine. So this one was, I think, easily the darkest of all the ones that I read. This one felt a lot more gritty, and so I think that made it feel darker. This reminded me a lot of if you've read the Master series by Lily White or Comfort Food by Kitty Thomas, but it had its own unique spin, I think, because of the criminal underground activities that we're dealing with. I think the first half was really the strongest. It was really slow, intentional. It shows the captor's manipulation and how that's impacting the heroine. I really felt like this was the strongest piece. Every scene felt intentional. The second half, we did some things to kind of like quickly progress the romance, and I just feel like it needed a little bit more time. But overall, I would give this one a rating of 4 stars. All right, next up, unfortunately, we have another DNF. During this time, a bunch of 5 stars. I was reading, and I was trying to read this book at the same time, and it did not work out. Anyways, should I tell you what it is before I start waxing poetic about why I didn't like this book? It's Heathen and Honeysuckle by Sarah A. Bailey. This is the first book in the Pacific Shore series. It's interconnected, it's contemporary romance, it's like small towns, got surfers, very summery, second chance element, dual timeline. So the premise for this is that our hero, Leo, is kind of a mischievous little surfer from Pacific Shores, and this is a place where it's like very sleepy, nothing really happens in town. So when a new girl moves in, he's very excited, and that's our heroine, Darby. She's a bit of a rule follower. She comes from a very religious family, and so she tends to be a bit of a stick in the mud. So Leo in this past timeline ends up really dedicating himself to bringing out her wild side, and they have a whirlwind romance. But in the present timeline, Darby is about to get married to someone who's perfect on paper, someone her father picked for her, but she knows this isn't love and she's got to figure out how to get back to it. So this one, originally I ended up DNFing at like 26% mark. What I was hoping for, because I was reading this during like a bunch of 5-star reads, I wanted something that's like easy and breezy, but had like a little bit of emotional. But I feel like this just really failed to deliver on the depth. I did find myself very curious about the current timeline, and I really wanted to spend more time there because I was like, what happened? How did we get to a second chance? But the past timeline just really didn't land for me. There was kind of this like insta-love feeling to the relationship, which I think feels right for that age, but I don't think it's very compelling narratively, especially because the hero is kind of painted as a player, but it seems to be almost in name only because you learn about his past and you learn like that's not even really true. And he ends up being like remarkably insightful for a high schooler. Like he almost talked like an older mentor rather than a teenage boy. And then with the heroine, and maybe this came later, I just felt like she didn't really stand up for herself. The plot of almost all of this book would just kind of happen to her. And I feel like a lot of what was attempted to be depth in the relationship was her just sort of like dumping her lore onto us. And so I think because of that instantness, and it was just like kind of sweet and easy, there's not a lot of tension there. I just never felt a lot of chemistry between the two of them. And I think that was kind of exacerbated by the fact that there was like these very poetic, over the top declarations that just felt like they came too quick and too easy. And it just doesn't sound like how people talk. I think the bottom line is that this was just really missing some depth and complexity to the story to really take it from what I think is a really good initial draft to really being that gut punch book that gets you emotionally, that really binds you to the characters. So I did end up DNFing this, and so I'm not going to give it a rating. Ooh, next up we have a good one. All right, so we have The Lotus Palace by Jeannie Lin. This is the first book in the Ping Kang Lee mysteries. Got it? It's a historical romance that takes place in the Tang Dynasty, China. It's got a mystery. So this is set at the Lotus Palace, as the title suggests. It's like an entertainment house. There's courtesans around that are trained to be very quippy and engage the patrons. They pour drink, play music, and it's just a place to be entertained with beautiful women. But our heroine is not one of those women. No, Yu Ying is actually a maidservant to one of the beauties, one of the courtesans, and she is very much in the background. She's very street smart, she's very practical, but she is never the star of the show. And then we have our hero by Huang, who is an aristocratic, kind of a playboy, someone that you don't really take that seriously. He goes to the Lotus Palace often to spend a lot of money, drink a lot of drink, but then there's a courtesan's murder that ends up throwing them together in order to solve the mystery, because this touched both of their lives. And all the while, they're going to be dreaming of a different life, because although they want to be together, Bai Huang's position means that she could never be his wife. So this book hooked me so early on. I found our heroine endlessly fascinating. She is so observant. She's got a quieter personality, but she will absolutely stand up for herself. She really knows her value. And I just wanted to know so much about her because she held so much back from us, and we got these little reveals that showed us just how interesting of a life she had led to this point. And the hero I ended up liking for entirely different reasons. So our heroine's like very reserved. Our hero is very like flirtatious and out there and audacious, and he isn't afraid to try and go after her in whatever capacity he can have her. He yearns and yearns. And I think because he had a little bit of that like hopeless romantic that's not quite aware of how his privilege as a male of the aristocracy has really greased the wheels of his life, paired with her pragmatism and being so acutely aware of reality, it just made for such good tension in their relationship, because it's so clear they want want to be together, but the practicalities of life just make it impossible. Every moment that they had together, kind of bittersweet, it's gotta end at some point. Like maybe this could be the last time that they have this interaction, and do they let themselves get that wrapped up in this romance when they know it can't last? So it just had this like yearning, this longing, this just, oh, this quality to it that I just absolutely loved. And I think having this written in third person really helped keep these characters a mystery, not reveal things too early. And so we were really navigating all of this with them, and any reveals that we got about them, we were learning along with the other characters. And I think that that really helped pace this book really well. And I also felt like this really delivered a lot of messages about women's value in a patriarchal society, the impact of status, like who has freedom, who gets pardoned, who is prioritized in a very intersectional way without feeling like I was being lectured. And then on top of that, you have a fun mystery. What happened here? And it's a true mystery. It's not a thriller. There's not like some huge reveal. You're putting the pieces together very slowly. And again, I think third POV was really important here because there's certain pieces that maybe your characters are holding back from you. And this just kept like great tension throughout, because if it wasn't something with the mystery, it was something with the romance, like even 90% in with the romance, I was like, I don't know how they're going to get together. I don't know how this happens. I end up giving this one a rating of 5 stars. Phenomenal, phenomenal. I want to read everything that Jeannie Lynn has ever written. Unfortunately, we do have another DNF on the horizon here. We have The Golden Dynasty by Kristen Ashley. This is the second book in the Fantasyland series. It's an interconnected series. It's kind of like a portal fantasy, romantasy, got like a warlord hero or barbarian hero, and sort of a forced marriage of sorts. So our heroine Cersei is an office manager at her dad's moving company, goes to bed one day and wakes up where she is in a parallel world, and she's in like a corral wearing like a sacrificial virgin attire with a bunch of other women. She's like, what is going on? And basically we have a bunch of dudes that are competing to find their brides amongst the mix of these women in sort of a chase-like ceremony. This leads to her drawing the attention of their king, essentially. So now she's got to figure out how to survive this marriage, but also how to get back to her home. So I wanted to read this because I was looking for something that was going to fill the void that the Warprise series had really left. I wanted something that had that clash of cultures, that barbarian warlord type. I thought that this was really going to fit the bill, but it quickly fell apart. So I had a couple of different issues. One of them was the heroine. She is supposed to be 35, and to be honest, the way she talks, the way she acts sounds more like someone who is a teenager. And so it was very frustrating to get a heroine that's over 30 and then she sounds exactly like every other YA heroine. She talks a lot about her outfits and what she's wearing and what other people look like, and not in a way that feels like world building, but in a way that's like, oh my God, what a cool outfit. And she relies a lot on words like freaking and awesome. And that was another thing. This had a very dated feel. I know this is an older book just by some of the language she used. At one point uses the word biatch. So if that doesn't tell you what era this came from, I don't know what will. She just felt like the main character in a Nickelodeon show. I think the other thing that I was running into is that I just don't feel like the writing was very high quality. Some might even say bad. There was just like a lot of inconsistencies from like chapter to chapter. At the beginning, there was like these fourth wall breaks. I don't like when books have that in general because it feels kind of cheap. Like, you're probably wondering how I got here. And then a couple chapters in, the writing started having like a lot of parentheticals in the sentence after every person to describe what they look like. And the descriptions were just very Sherry Papini. If you get that reference, I love you so much. Basically, it's just very like, this one was short and fat, and this one was tall and skinny, and this one had skinny eyebrows, and this one had bushy eyebrows. Didn't really tell me a lot about who that person was. And it like interrupted the sentence. So you would have to go back and be like, wait, okay, sorry, rewind. What was this sentence about? I got distracted by what Bertha looks like. And then there were these attempts to do world building. I think she just starts describing everything around her, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of consequence. Like, I knew that the pillows didn't have tassels. Why is that important? I knew what every blanket looked like. I knew what the tent looked like. I I just didn't really feel like it was aiding in me having a sense of what this world was like or what this culture was like, so much as just like, here's a bunch of stuff that I am able to see. And then there just started to be a ton of repetition. It was like everything this guy did for her, somehow, secretly, it was like an immense honor, and she is the most iconic, wonderful person ever. Everything was an immense honor. And honestly, even the days started to get repetitive. It felt like the same things were kind of happening. I was just like really frustrated. I really thought that the setting was cool. I thought the setup was cool. And so I really wanted this to go somewhere interesting. Like craft-wise, this is absolutely terrible. I'm never gonna think about it again after I make this video. I DNF'd it, so no rating. No, of course my camera decided to die right as I was about to talk about my favorite books. Can you see this? No, you don't. I had to plug my camera in. But we are to, I think, the most important books that I read this entire month. Should we get back into the books? We have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This is the first book in the Moonfall series. This is a kind of like epic romantasy is how I would describe it. You've got dragons, you've got a rebellion, you've got prophecy. This has everything you want. So this series is about our heroine, Rave, and she is part of a rebellion group and she works as an assassin. Things go wrong in her latest little project. They are after someone to make an example of because the rebellion has gone after so many high-ranking fae that they're like, we gotta get this sorted. And so when they catch Rave, they're like, excellent, we're gonna make an example out of you. So while she is awaiting her sentence in prison, this is when she comes in contact with our hero by the name of Khan. So he's been following a few clues. He's been trying to collect some different pieces from a fallen moon. And this is when he runs into Rave. This leads to the two of them starting to chase down some answers. And what they're going to find is going to blow up everything they knew about this world. So this is a reread for me. So this was obviously 5 stars once again. I think on this read, I was able to pay attention to a lot more of the details because I had the broad strokes of the story. There was so much that ends up becoming relevant in book 2 that I think I would have forgotten about if I hadn't done this reread. I read that first portion with completely new eyes because the story just takes you on such an adventure that there's things at the beginning of the story that are very much relevant to the series that you almost forget about because you get caught up in some of the later actions. And honestly, I spent this entire book like just trying not to cry because I was like, I love these characters so much. I love Khan, and watching him just pine after her, oh, it got me in my feels. So it remains a 5-star. It will forever be a 5-star. This is just like an incredible epic series with a romance that is so strong and yet like political intrigue that is just as interesting. So then I moved on to the second book, which just released this past month. It's The Ballad of Falling Dragons. This is, once again, by Sarah A. Parker. It was like everything I wanted, and yet somehow nothing that I expected. The first 25%, I just felt like was so intense. You're kind of getting reestablished with all your characters. You're getting new perspectives. All of them are in a bad place. And so you're just like, oh my God, I hope something positive happens in this book. And I really loved that this didn't have that thing that I think a lot of like second books end up having where we abandon any world building. We're not building the relationship anymore. I feel like there was still so many political pieces that had been slotted into place in that first book, but kept getting expanded upon. We keep learning more of the lore, more of the backstory, and things just continue to get more complex. And I also really liked that we got a lot of new perspectives because I think this not only opened up the world, but also got us different perspectives on some of the things that were happening. We were able to kind of tackle a lot of different areas of the world at once by having all these different perspectives. And I really feel like that was a good choice storytelling wise. There was also a lot that got tied back to book 1. Now that I knew how many of these little details were important, this book became very dense because you don't always understand what the details mean, but you need to be paying attention to every single detail to make sure that you understand things that are happening later. It might not even come back up in this book. And I just thought that like, excellent. It did make for a little bit of slow reading on my part because I wanted to make sure I had everything locked in. I continued to love the relationship between Han and Rave. There's still so much that I think they have to unpack about who they are, who they were, how they can even really end up being together because there's so many things politically in their way. But I did really like that we did spend the majority of the book with them together. There wasn't a lot of time that they were separated, but I still felt like I was getting relationship development because truly one of my favorite things is just seeing Han on page loving his lady unwaveringly and tenderly while being gruff and so capable and a warrior. I just nom 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 nom. Also, I think one of my new favorite perspectives one of my new favorite characters that we got introduced to is Pyrog. Hilarious. He was great. He did add a good dose of comedic relief, especially during like kind of tense sections where you're like, oh, okay, I can breathe for a little bit. Some of the things in his perspective weren't quite as dense. So I think those were really strategically placed. Not only was it like fun to be in his perspective, but it also gave you a little bit of break and a little bit of levity before diving back into the deeply serious. I do think the pacing on this was a little bit goofy, and I think that's really my only critique. The beginning felt really intense and the end was really intense, but there was kind of this like middle 50%, which is a good chunk of the book because look at this thicky boy, where it felt like the pacing really slowed down. There was a lot in terms of getting a lot of information. As I said, it is a very dense book, but I feel like the action really slowed down and you weren't as certain about the direction during that portion. And so it did feel like it dragged just ever so slightly. But am I gonna complain about that? Not really, because I love this series and that ending was incredible. It did not end how I thought it would. Things slotted into place that I thought were going to be a later reveal. And so now I'm just like, I need book 3. So many theories. But anyways, rating of 5 stars. All right, I have officially sweated through this shirt. What a great choice to wear black because y'all can't see it. But I would really love to hear from you now about whether you've read any of these books, whether you had the same or different experience. I want to know what your top reads were from this past month. Have there been new authors you've been loving, new series that you've discovered? I want to hear anything and everything about how your reading's been going lately. And with all of that, thank you so much for being here. I know these videos are always so long, so you are truly the real MVP for making it to the end. Don't forget to like this video if you did find yourself liking it at any point, and don't forget to subscribe. I would really love to have you back on more videos. Really do hope I see you on my next video. Bye-bye.